Thank you, Dr. Flowers, also for your great work on single payer, full Medicare for all. Everybody in, nobody out. Well, Kevin Zeese called this effort a movement of leaders, and that's what you all should aspire to. There's a lot of argument why it should be a movement of leaders. First of all, you won't be dependent on others. You'll create your own ideas, your own space, your own strategies, your own tactics. I just heard on the radio today that there's Occupy Prescott, Arizona, all the way to Occupy Hartford, Connecticut. And there's a wonderful spontaneity about this. I've often said, half of democracy is showing up, but I now have to modify it because it's really half of democracy showing up and staying. Not just a one-day event like Washington is famous for, weekend rallies, a few hours, and you leave, and Congress comes back. Congress is not here when you're here, and Congress is here when you're not here. So you're staying. You're staying. That's very important to spread all over the country. Staying. Staying is another word for stamina. It's another word for seriousness. And it's another word to tell the power structure that you're not going away. Just add it up. For over 2 weeks now, your efforts, Occupy Wall Street, and all the other Occupies, have reached the national media. Okay? So, and I don't think more than 100,000 people have yet showed up everywhere. And there are hundreds of thousands, tens of millions, ready to show up everywhere. Because this is a majoritarian movement. There's no doubt about that. Poll after poll shows over 80 to 90% of the people think our country's going into the wrong direction. Well, who's pushing it in the wrong direction? The same people who are ruling this country are driving this country into the ground. So, over 75% of the people think corporations, big corporations, have too much control over their lives. That's a majoritarian position. Over 80% of the people want full Medicare for all. That's a majoritarian position. Over 75 to 80% of the people think there's too much power in too few hands. Yeah. Making decisions by the few for the many. Over 65% of the people think that globalization is costing them jobs. Yeah. Over 80% of the people like the following adjectives because they describe what's going on. Crony capitalism. Yeah. Corporate capitalism. Yeah. Casino, Wall Street capitalism. Yeah. And globalized capitalism. Yeah. What do they signify? They signify an abandonment of our country. These U.S. corporations were born in the U.S., chartered in the U.S. They rose to profit on the backs of American workers. They went to Washington to be bailed out by American taxpayers. When they got in trouble overseas, they called on the U.S. Marines to save them decade after decade. And what's their response to the American people? Is it gratitude? No way. Their response is, we're out of here with your jobs and your industries to fascist and communist regimes overseas who know how to keep their workers in their repressed place. So there's no patriotism by these corporations. There's no allegiance to this country other than to control it or ship its jobs overseas. Yeah. And that's the argument. The argument is that these corporations who have been coddled, who've been given tax breaks, who've been deregulated without law and order, who have not been prosecuted for their Wall Street crimes that collapse the economy on the backs of American workers, taxpayers, and investors, they have no allegiance to our country. That's why the phrase occupy is very important, because they've taken the country from us, and we're going to reoccupy it and run it for the people of this country. If I may make a few suggestions. Number one, it's interesting the way the Occupy movement has developed, isn't it? See, when you got to keep the ruling classes guessing. Okay? So they're saying this effort is leaderless. Well, when it's leaderless, according to their definition, it cannot be stereotyped. It's hard to figure out. It can't be decapitated, can it? So keep increasing your numbers, increasing your locales around the country. It's like a building of democracy. You don't want to move out when just the foundation is built or a few doors are in place. You want to keep building 100,000, 500,000, 2 million, 10 million. Keep building it, every community. So there's an Occupy movement in every city, town, village, farmland in America. All linked, and all pursuing fair play, pursuing justice, pursuing decentralized power, pursuing what the Pledge of Allegiance to the flag ends with, which ought to get great emphasis, right? With liberty and justice for all, not liberty and justice for a few. The more these occupying efforts focus on the buildings containing the oppressors, the more important it is. You surrounded the insidious Chamber of Commerce a little while ago. That's the incubator for more corporate crimes, more corporate welfare, more corporate fraud, and more corporate control on our government. That's the seedbed of the corporate state. The corporate state that Franklin Delano Roosevelt in 1938 called fascism. Let's call it what it is. He said in a message to Congress, 1938, he said, when government's controlled by private economic power, that's fascism. Those were his words, not a paraphrase. So I would suggest some other buildings. They're both corporate buildings and government buildings. See this here? Department of Commerce, right? Right? Oh, over there. Yeah. Well, the Department of Commerce doesn't represent one half of commerce, which are the consumers, right? The homeowners, the tenants, the people who are drowning in debt. And whoever built the Department of Commerce, where you only have one equation in the marketplace, the sellers, the vendors. Then go to the American Chemical Society building. They got a nice building here in Washington. Go over to the National Association of Broadcasters, who are using our public air